on the recording. So she surprises me every time as I'm in the middle of saying she's going to hit recording. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Highlight Conversations. This is episode number 5 now. Yes, heading into the new year with number 5. I'm stoked for that. Still loving these conversations for sure. Thank you, everybody who's taken the time to join us. The purpose of these meet and greets, as they are, is to give you guys accessible mentorship. So for you to have the opportunity to ask questions to whoever it is we've got in the hot seat, Miss Hannah Betts, you can see her next door to me, at least you can on my computer. And you're very welcome. You can sit back and just enjoy the conversation, but we also would love you to be part of it if you choose to. And before we get into that, I'm going to hand over to my sister from another mister, Miss Melissa, that almost rhymes 3 times, to tell you how it works behind the scenes. So Melissa, if you'd be kind enough.
I'm here. Hey, everybody. Welcome so much for joining us. So glad to have you here. I'm here to help you navigate in case you've never been to a Zoom meeting, or remind you if you haven't been in a while. Maxine's going to lead this conversation. If you have any questions that come up, you can put them in the chat. But before we go there, we just need to make sure everybody knows where the chat is. So let's head over to the bottom right of the screen. You should see a chat function there. And if you would, just maybe say hi and where you're messaging from, because we also want to know everyone who's here and where you guys are calling from, and that everybody knows where the chat is. So go ahead and put those in. I'm saying hi. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, sweet. Okay. Also over there, if you look where it says everyone under the chat function, you can hit that down arrow button and Maxine's name will be there. That's where you want to send any questions that come up during the conversation. She'll call on you, you'll unmute yourself, you can ask your question, and then we just ask you to mute yourself when you're done. And that's all from me. Thank you again, everybody. Maxine, back to you.
All right. So in the hot seat this week, we have our teammate and a friend of many, many years, Miss Hannah Betts. From the outside, it looks like Hannah has followed one of the most glamorous career paths imaginable, from being a gymnast to an outdoor instructor to a police officer to a world champion skydiver, and then leading into being a Hollywood stuntwoman, her current occupation. But each of these paths forced Hannah to face substantial fears, be it performing something for the first time, be it the voice of authority in a room of hostiles, or trying to overcome nerves in the moment. All of them underlying also the fear of failure in front of her peers. So all of these roles have required Hannah to control her inner voice and push through the fear. For a person who is literally paid to be someone else, Hannah has some valuable insights into the pitfalls of comparing your life to others, and also the importance of following your own path to become the best version of yourself, as Miss Hannah is right now. Hannah, welcome to Highlight Conversations.
Hi, gang. Ooh, that's an intro.
I know, it feels like I'm done with that each time. I'm like, boom, we pass the mic. So as we like to start these, we're just going to start off with your early days a little bit and get a little bit of a sense of where you've come from and how that might have contributed to where you are today. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you were like when you were younger and getting into gymnastics and how that's helped you get to your point today?
Ooh, don't pull on that thread. I grew up in England, hence the accent. Small village, a place called Cornwall, very rural, middle of nowhere, kind of almost, I guess the equivalent would be like the Hawaii of England, but a lot less warm. So I grew up very much a country girl, middle class upbringing, fairly normal-ish childhood, the usual divorce and all that good stuff, shenanigans that lots of people go through. My mum put me into gymnastics at a pretty early age, which I did pretty well in, considering, you know, where I was. I wasn't like national champ or anything, but I was county champ in the Southwest England squad and stuff like that, and was just always pushed into a bit of an athletic background, whether I liked it or not. And gymnastics it's definitely come in handy, but I actually didn't love it as a child. But and it later on developed some of my fear of failure stuff, which we can get into the nitty-gritty of later. Then went to school, high school. Didn't want to go to university straight off, so I did this thing called a gap year. where you have to raise a bunch of money, go through some selection things. And I ended up living in Honduras for a year in Central America, teaching English. I did Spanish at school, so I spoke pretty good Spanish, and lived Central America between the age of 18 and 19, came back, worked as a lifeguard, saved up money, went to university, hated it, left university, traveled to Australia, worked my way around Australia, came back, did an associate's degree in outdoor education, became an outdoor sports instructor that worked with at-risk youth for a year or two. And then somewhere along the lines, and I still don't know why, I became a police officer, which says, it's funny to say out loud now because it feels like a different life, but I was like a full-time 999 or 911 response police officer for 4 years, which is when I discovered skydiving. I was then living in a big city and missed kind of outdoor rural life. And I was like, what can I do that's outdoorsy? And I was like, I'm just going to sign up for a skydiving course, thinking it was a bucket list and just tick it off, get my AFF, get my license, and just say that's that. And then someone mentioned competitions and world championships.
Yeah.
And then my life U-turned. I moved on to the drop zone in a trailer so I could save money for skydiving, because you don't earn that much in the police. So I lived in a trailer with no indoor bathroom for about 4 years, so I didn't have to pay a mortgage, so I could compete. Got on the British team, got sponsored.
Oh my God.
Career break from the police, of which I never went back to. Competed, moved to Skydive Paris, became an instructor for a long time, and then slipped into stunts. And here I am talking
wow.
to you today.
I feel almost dizzy listening to that whole thing there. I mean, like, that's one hell of a difference there. Let's go back. We need to unpack that. We got to unpack that.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
So let me ask you, like, firstly, the fact that you were pushed into gymnastics, that I didn't know that. Or you say you pushed, but you know, it wasn't necessarily the thing that you wanted to do. I mean, look, what's that like as a kid to end up being, did you have like the soccer mom version or something like that? How did that work?
Yeah, very, very much so. My mom was a gymnastics coach. And this is absolutely no disrespect to my parents, who, when I talk about these things, it's not said with a blame, like everybody's doing the best that they can with the tools that they have in the day. But I realized back in the day, I was never really asked what I genuinely enjoy or have passion for. As a child, I was told to do things and I do them. And quite often I think we can mistake what we're naturally good at as something that we really enjoy, which isn't actually always the case. And while I'm incredibly grateful for gymnastics and the body awareness that it gave me and the foundation it gave me, I look back on it and I don't remember having like fond memories. And I often used to get a sense of dread going in to train and do this. But one thing it did teach me was discipline and hard work. And that's what my mum really taught me. Is I wasn't, and still am not, the most natural athlete in general at all, like even body shape and how I looked. But I won and I got good at things just because my mum did teach me that you don't have to be the most talented, you just have to work the hardest.
Yeah, consistency is the thing that really makes the results, right?
100%.
But when you say you didn't like it, like, or it wasn't your passion, I mean, did you not like being around other girls? Was it the body awareness part? Like, what? Let's just unpack that a little bit.
I didn't have any body shame or awareness part back then. I was too young, honestly. I don't think that came around till I was probably 14, 15, after I had kind of left gymnastics at that point, like intensely.
Yeah.
It was very different back then as well. By the time you turned 16 in gymnastics, you were considered like too old. Hilarious. So I look back and I was like, I wish I picked it up again in my 20s. At that time I thought I was ancient, which is always funny when you look back on your younger self and you want to slap them. But I think it was more I just didn't have a real passion for it, you know. And if I look back and I think if I was asked, I would have wanted to do more dance or martial arts or ice skating or something a little bit more creative, I think, is where my brain lied. But again, I wasn't asked as a kid. I was just told to be the best and work the hardest, which isn't the worst thing.
No, for sure, for sure. And so post gymnastics, like the storyline that you gave us, there's a lot of travel there, you know, like whether it's going to Honduras or whether it's the gap year, and you know, young to be traveling the world as well, you know. That's a big step.
Very much so. I mean, I was lucky to grow up in a household where we did go on some pretty cool holidays, which gave me a taste for travel. And where I grew up is one of the most beautiful places in the world, and I still hold it to my heart dearly. But I did know I needed to get out to explore more things. I did know it was a very sheltered area, and I always just had this drive to. It's quite a common thing in the UK for people to take a gap year, and I just remember thinking I want to do it. And because I had an A-level, A-level is, I don't know what it's like, a diploma.
It's like a high school diploma or something here, is it? Something like that.
Spanish. I wanted to try and go to a Spanish speaking country.
Yep.
And so, yeah, it seemed like, 18 to 19. I mean, I definitely grew up really fast living in a developing country. There were 6 of us and we were all paired up, and I definitely grew up pretty quickly. And then
I feel like there's something very special about that, because the more you travel, I think when you're younger, the more you're exposed to diversity, the more you're exposed to having to do things for yourself, regardless of whatever might be thrown your way. I think it makes you much more independent. It makes you have to deal with adverse situations for yourself and stand on your own 2 feet. And I think that opens doors in your future life, you know.
100%. And it's funny though, sometimes when you look back on things when you're younger, you just get on with it, you know. Then you look back when you're older and you're like, oh my God, you don't have electricity, you barely had running water, there was no phone, no internet, the only communication was through letters. And if you were really having an emergency, someone could drive you to a local town to hopefully use a phone that might work. But it's crazy looking back on it, but how it broadens your horizon.
It's, you know, it's funny because I've often thought that we talk about bold, brave lives a lot, with highlight that being part of our mission to inspire women and girls to lead bold, brave lives. And I think when I look back at parts of my history, and I feel like this is the same for you, like you just said, things appear to be bold and brave in retrospect, but they don't feel it at the time. Does that ring true for you?
It does. I mean, I remember having a level of anxiety and nerves going into it. It wasn't like breezy. I was mildly terrified the whole time. But there's often I get that feeling, but I also know, well, it's happening. You're doing it. Of course, that's going to be there. But the idea of not doing it was just completely out of the question. Like, you're absolutely doing it, and it's probably going to be a wee bit uncomfortable. Once you're in it, and you got to kind of figure it out. So I quite often trick myself into doing things. I think, you know, you just got to go, and once you're in it, then you'll figure it out.
Does that come back to the theme, which I feel I hear a lot from you whenever we chat, is you do it whether you're scared or not?
Yeah. Oh, I'm scared. People think I'm like brave and courageous. I'm not. I'm an absolute baby about so many things. I'm scared all the time. I just do it anyway.
Well, we'll talk more about that when we come onto your Stuntwoman stuff, because that just blows my mind, and I'm sure we'll get into a deeper conversation about that then. So lots of travel, lots of just throwing yourself in the deep end, being scared and getting on with it. And then the police, and I got to call you on this one. You said you don't know how you ended up there. We got to just get into that a little bit. How do you go from having all this travel and what have you to becoming a police officer, which is a very male-dominated environment as well?
Yeah, it is.
Is it a security thing? Like, how was that even on the radar?
Definitely, I think it was a security thing. So the way, again, I grew up in an area where a lot of people just go into public services. Like, I have so many friends from school that are police officers, teachers, or firefighters, like literally, because that's kind of one of the main job sources in that area. I mean, there's tourism and stuff, but so I really wasn't taught to think outside of the box as a kid, or be creative, or like, what are you good at? What are you naturally passionate about? What do you enjoy? Do you enjoy being around people, or do you hate people? Like, I wasn't asked that. And the job that I was in at the time was great, and I felt very strongly about it. It was about, you know, taking at-risk kids, as in at risk of about to go down the wrong path or already in trouble with the law or come from neglect or abuse, and you use outdoor activities as personal development and stimulation, and it was great, but the money wasn't super great, and I just couldn't figure out where it was going. And I probably, knowing me, had a minor panic moment and went, okay, what's really obvious and secure and good pension, police officer.
You had a midlife crisis in your 20s. It's great.
I think there was a mild like need to do something, and I think just because it always seemed like a safe, obvious option, I was like, well, I'll do that, and you know, I've got a really loud voice, I'll be great at it. So yeah, I went into it, and I enjoyed it, and I got a lot out of it. I got, you know, put in some situations, not necessarily out on the streets, but more in regards to meetings and boardrooms and organizing raids and being around men. And I unfortunately I got to see the side of life, like 90% of the time you're dealing with a shitty side of life that you don't get to see as a normal person. So it was less going around saving babies and more seeing really shit things, but which was really good for me. And one of the things that stood out the most was honestly the domestic side, the violence side of things, and seeing how screwed women can get in regards to the system and being scared and stuck. And I specialized in that for the last year and a half. I was a domestic violence liaison officer for the last year and a half. I was still responding to 999 calls, but that was kind of one of the avenues as I was down towards the end. So.
And is that more like a counseling position? What do you, yeah. Tell me more about that.
So it was normally the woman, in fact, every time it was the woman that was the victim. If she decided that she wanted to go through court or, you know, press charges or actually, you know, take her case further, that she had a one-on-one point of contact, someone that knew the case, knew her and understood her, to give an element of support to get her through the court process, because it's a big deal. And the last thing you need is to be shoved from pillar to post to different officers that don't really know your case or your background. So it was more about having a one-on-one liaison with the victim to support them all the way through and post court as well, if it went their way. And dealing with
go ahead.
Non-governmental organizations and liaison with them as well. Yeah.
And I feel like I feel there must be have been occasions when you were a police officer where you come into a room where you're trying to use your voice, for want of a better expression. I mean, how I mean, you were still pretty young at this point. Am I thinking still 20s, right? That sounds intimidating a little bit.
I look back at pictures of me then, and I was like, I look like 18. How did anybody take me seriously? So,
well, how did they? How do you handle those situations? Like, what's your memory of it?
I remember thinking, fake it till you make it, and be like, I'm small, you know, so I'm only like, you know, 5'4". But in some ways I was actually, there's two things about it. I used to use my voice, and I guess understanding of the situation in just quite a commanding way. I guess I knew I had to make up for authority in a different way. And normally intelligence and communication goes much further than just being a 6-foot burly dude. And another thing is it disarms people. If we went to domestic violence situations or like a massive pub fight, the guys would normally send me through the doors first, because it would de-escalate situations, because it would break the norm. If you send big guys in, they get amped up even more and they want to just keep on fighting. They put me through the door and I kind of like poo-poo all of them and like almost take the piss out of what they're doing. Everybody seemed to calm down quicker. But that being said, you know, in a lot of domestic violence situations, that's when I really got my first taste of men. No disrespect, this does not mean all men, just in general, men really talking over women's voice and not even hearing or listening and just squashing it. And that stood by me a long time, like not letting the women speak, their wives speak, and talking over them. I just have very vivid memories of that and going, this is bad, and it probably happens everywhere.
And I feel like you must have found yourself in those positions as well, where men are talking over you, especially in the police force, for sure.
Oh yeah,
and probably also in the stunt world. I wouldn't be surprised.
I can't tell you how many times I got called love or sweetheart as a police officer when dealing with stuff. Yeah, it was constant. It's the usual.
How does it make you feel when you get talked over?
Now?
Yeah. Or back then, or both?
Back in the day, I used to get infuriated and frustrated and didn't know how to handle it, because we just weren't given those tools younger, and especially I think when, I'm 44. So when, back then in my 20s, we really hadn't, we were just taught to be quiet and shut up and not have an opinion or not valid or let the dude speak. So even though I had these feelings of injusticeness happening, I didn't know how to handle it, and I would get frustrated. Then I went through a stage of oversteering where I'd react to it because I had enough and I was mad, but I wasn't getting the reaction that I needed from them. Now, because it still happens all the time, and I know it's kind of going to happen, I'm used to it. I don't have any reaction. I take a deep breath and I tell them I'm not done, I'm still talking, or I'll point out that I'm being continually interrupted and that's not okay. Now I'm like, I have zero fucks are given. I'll just say, I'm still talking. Shut up.
Yeah, I suppose in those situations, all we can do is control our reaction to it, not what's said to us and how it's said, right?
Yeah, and you have to stay calm about it. Otherwise, you're not going to be listened to, unfortunately. Even though we have the right to be really mad and angry, it's not going to make that person learn or change their behavior. So when I feel the rage boiling up and I want to react, whether it's a Facebook comment or a public comment or a face-to-face comment, when I feel the rage and the sarcastic comments or the shout or the whatever I'm totally justified to feel and say, I have to check and go, is what I'm saying going to help the next woman have a conversation with this human being, or am I going to make it the same or worse? And so I just have to think about what is the best way they're going to learn. And if I have to suck it up and spoon feed this to them, even though I'm a victim, then that's the only way that I need to do it, because I need to make it easier for the next woman that's going to have a conversation.
Yeah. And we even had one, I think it was yesterday, there's a post up in one of the Facebook forums just advertising, come join us, it'd be great for you to join us. And there was a less than stellar comment from someone going, oh, blah, blah, another woman breaking the nut, blah, blah. Like, how does it make you feel when you read that, especially from the skydiving community?
So it's funny, I mean, we talked about this even now when the comment in itself was, we were just advertising this conversation. And I believe the comment from, which is terrifying to me as a tandem instructor that made the comment. I wish I could remember his name because I'd call him out.
You can find it, 1 to 2, doesn't matter.
He was like, oh, great, another woman talking about how she smashed the glass ceiling and is I can't wait to be inspired by the same old boring story, blah, 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 blah. It was super troll comment. And my initial feeling, and I still get it, is to shrink inside of myself, feel a tiny bit of shame or guilt or worry, like, oh my God, am I doing something bad? Like, I still have that conditioning. Even now, a comment like that will make me go, whoop. And then I have to take a breath, go, hold on a minute, what are we doing? No, this is his bullshit, not my bullshit. He's got issues. He clearly doesn't like women that much. That's okay. He's got, and also then my reaction was to write something super sarcastic and facetious back to him that would get a laugh from everybody and make me feel temporarily better, but probably feed the fuel of his troll comment and it not be productive.
Yeah.
So instead, what I actually said, which may have sounded sarcastic, but I genuinely meant it, was thank you so much for giving an example of why we still need to have these conversations. Thank you for proving our point.
Yeah, and I mean, just to hear the other side of the scale, is it where we have so many wonderful male allies out there too, which for me, the area of frustration is always the idea that to raise women is to some way threaten men, because it's absolutely not. The way I think raising women is a win-win for everybody. And so for all the male allies that are out there that actually are on board with that and see the value of it, then thank you. And to those who don't, and for me, I hope there's a day where you don't feel threatened by that. And that's the day when we all win,
Yeah, we need to get to a point where those male allies step up for us, so we're not fighting the argument all the time. Shouldn't be our fault.
Yeah. Anyway, so police officer.
Yeah.
Goodness, that sounds like a trip for sure. Decided that you were done, like many other folks before you. In fact, you discover skydiving. It's like, what am I doing? It's 180 and head in this direction to life in Langer, I think it was, wasn't it? Tell us, because this is the skydiving forum. Tell us a little bit about your skydiving journey.
So I turned up to do my AFF on my own. Incredibly nervous. The most nervous Nelly student ever, like diligently did my ground school, took everything very seriously. Like I was convinced that if I turned my 280 square foot parachute more than like 90 degrees under 500 feet, I would absolutely die. Kind of like really took everything incredibly tanned, was very, very nervous and super stiff, and wasn't natural out the door because I was so scared. And then when I did figure it out, then it was great. And that's often how I learn everything. I'm really shit at stuff at the beginning, and then suddenly I realize I just have to stick to it. And then when it clicks, I have quite a fast learning curve, and I've realized that that's just generally how I learn things. So I did my AFF, started work, got my A license, and I specifically remember seeing a cover on our British skydiving magazine. That's when Air Kicks, the current female British team, had just won a World Championships. And I looked at that and felt incredibly inspired to see these 4 strong women on a podium. And this was when I still didn't fully understand all the competitions that we had. And I was really inspired by it. And I do very well when I have set goals with things. I'm quite a drifter if I don't have an end goal in sight sometimes. I just remember going, how do I get really good really quickly at skydiving? And someone said, wind tunnel. And I was like, what's the wind tunnel? Where's the nearest one? And they're like, Florida. And I went, oh, that's a really long way away. But our drop zone happened to be doing a trip there for like a week of wind tunnel flying. And I had, I think, like 35 skydives, no money, put it all on the credit card recklessly with no idea how I was going to pay it off. Just knew.
Were you on a career break at this point from the police?
No, I was fully in the police.
Weekend warrior. Yeah.
Yeah, full weekend warrior.
Okay.
Just out the gate, like, 35 jumps. Went and picked up the wind tunnel ship pretty quick, which is where I met Eliana Rodriguez. It was the first time I laid eyes on Eliana, and I saw her flying in the wind tunnel, and I was like, who is that? She was like head down with a booty suit on. It was amazing. Anyway, and then I just dove into 4-way really quite relentlessly, and like I said, moved on to the drop zone. I changed my police force. I went from Birmingham police to Nottinghamshire so I could be closer to Langer, and then moved on to the drop zone, and then spent what would have been my rent or mortgage money on skydives. I remember my inspector was not happy about it. He's like, you telling me I've got one of my police officers living on a drop zone like a gypsy? I was like,
well, ignorance is bliss.
So yeah, so that's kind of how that happened. And then I just went pretty hard in 4-way, and then was lucky enough to kind of meet Sarah Smith, who was my teammate on the British team. Both of us were very green and very new, but we had some raw talent, and we knew we needed to convince 2 veterans for the perfect combination. And somehow to this day, I still don't know how we convinced Kate Stevens and Sparky to join us, but I think they just believed in our raw enthusiasm and knew that, I don't know, like Sparky said no to us 5 times, and we just ignored, honestly, ignored her. Because in our head, we knew that me and Sarah, like, this is the team. And I just remember when she said no, it didn't even faze me. Sarah's like, what are we going to do? I was like, no, it's Sparky.
And Sparky was on air kicks, right? So just for those that don't know, she was the world champion at the time, already had that journey. So when you're talking about experience, she'd been there, done that.
And like, can you leave that team that's like the best that's ever been in the UK and come and join two people that don't even have 1,000 jumps yet? I think I had like 700. And Kate, who's been semi-retired for 3 years, and do this team because we have a really good feeling about it. And we just,
where does the drive come from? I mean, I don't mean to interrupt you here, but what I'm hearing is just extreme drive.
I think if a challenge, I like a challenge, and I do get inspired. If someone says something's not possible, that is a little bit like a red flag to me. I've realized someone's like, well, that's never really been done, or you can't do that. I do tend to have them, well, watch this motherfucker attitude, because I'm like, someone always has to be that person, right? And I quite often, I think I've had a perception of when other people are projecting their own fear onto me versus what I feel about it inside. So I remember specifically people saying, don't do that because air kicks are going to compete again without Sparky. You'll never beat them. Like, wait till it's easier. And I was like, well, that's not the way to win. Like, who knows what's possible? And I just remember feeling, every now and then I'll get feelings, right? Something that seems like probably a stupid idea that's really not necessarily going to work. But if there's a bit of a tingle there, I tend to listen to the tingle feeling, like, oh, this is probably a terrible idea. And everyone knows what I'm talking about. There's just this little perception where you're like, that
little self-doubt kind of thing.
Well, no, the opposite. Like,
oh, right.
The opposite. Like, I should be self-doubting. Everybody else is saying it, but there's something there saying
intuition that's saying go for it, kind of thing.
The universe is just giving you that little, it's okay, do it. And that's the difference, I think, between making that jump or listening to everybody else's voice. And like, if I'd listened to everybody else, I wouldn't have done that team at all.
So it's following on from this, like this idea of fear of failure amongst your peers, like, I'm not hearing that from you. I'm hearing like, screw it. If they say they can't do it, I'm just going to go out and do it.
Yeah.
How has that disappeared for you in those moments?
I think I do better in a team environment with the failure thing. I think individually I struggle a little bit more, but I think there was just such strong momentum between me, Sarah, and when we did get going, and just sometimes there's just this chemistry or this feeling and this drive that, you just got to you just have to keep going. It's hard to
I wonder if, like, I know that when you were in, and the name of the team was Storm, that your 4-way team, and I know you have a commitment to each other to go ahead and to charge forward for a championship and what have you. But if you're on your own, where does the courage come from, and the self-belief? Like, for example, and I'm jumping around a little bit, but let's get to it for a second. As a stunt woman, for example, you may be part of a team per se, but you're still out there performing on your own kind of thing. So how do you overcome the fear of failure when it's you, not committed to a team?
I think just age and experience has played a big part in that. When I was younger, I was genuinely embarrassed to try anything new in front of anyone through fear of looking like an idiot. And I think that comes from that I had such pressure to be the best all the time from my childhood, that the idea of not being the best, I attached to shame and just don't do it. Like, oh, if you're not going to be awesome at it, or you're going to look silly, that terrified me. And then I think over the years of once I'd gotten over myself and realized it wasn't that bad, or everybody failed, the more that you see it and the more that you understand it, which took me honestly years and years, probably not until the last 7 years, to feel a bit more confident about messing up in front of people, that I overcame it you just go, well, what's the worst that's going to happen? Am I going to die at this moment? Well, stunt.
Maybe. I'm not sure there's a Stuntwoman, that may not be the best analogy.
Like, trying things and just ignoring all the voices that are, even if there are outside voices, normally there's not as many outside voices as you think there are. You're creating them in your head. And even if they are there, it's none of their business. It's none of your business. Like, I let other people's opinion get in the way of what I wanted to do so often that when I realized it started becoming detrimental, and I watched other people and got inspired by other people that weren't scared to fail and be silly, and realized that the only way you succeed is by failing. And I learned that on Storm, and I still quote him to this day, Dan BC. He was just like, everybody quits teams, and I know Melissa and you can count to this, because they get to an obstacle and they're like, oh, it didn't work. It's like every team is going to have disagreements, obstacles, whether it's finances, timing, injuries, disagreements, personalities, logistics, work. And it's just overcoming one obstacle at a time. That's all it is. And I think with Storm, we were just lucky because we were so committed to that idea that the end goal was in sight, and it was just a given that we were going to get there. And that if an obstacle came up, we're like, oh, here it is. We were told this was going to happen. And it did constantly. And I think that's just how we got there.
So let's get into the World Championships, or the roads, we say the road to the World Championships, because I find that very interesting, the idea that you train together, and you can tell us a little bit more about it, but just to set it up for you, like training together, the four of you plus Gary on camera and Dan BC as your coach, for a very, very specific goal: become world champions. That's it. It's all down to that one competition.
World champions. We had to beat the current world champions at the nationals, because the current world champion team was a different British team. We had to beat them at nationals to then be able to go and compete. So it wasn't even like be the best team. It's like
you got to get your invite first, kind of thing.
Yeah, and the team that we're up against happened to be the current world champions that were a British team. We had no business trying to do what we did. Honestly, no business.
Tell us about the comp. I'm excited now. I want to hear.
What we were trying to do. Literally, people almost might have patted me on the head and gone, oh, that's sweet. Good for you. And I just remember internalizing it, and that would just fuel me. I'd be like, I'm just going to keep training. So what was your question about the competition?
Tell us about the nationals competition and then going to Worlds, because I was at Worlds, I saw you guys compete and it was really close. I'm like, I want to hear more about that.
So nationals was very special because we just knew that we had put our, blood, sweat and tears, heart, soul, everything into it, to the point that we had, quit. So we found a bit of a sponsor that enabled us. We realized that for us to be able to get the amount of training jumps in to beat this team, we had to leave our jobs and get like 700 skydives in somehow. We knew that we couldn't do it as weekend warriors. And we managed to secure a very flaky sponsor for a certain amount of time that gave us enough money to be able to just survive, ramen noodles and jump and train. So we had already taken like career breaks and and mine was easier because I was a police officer not earning very much money and take a career break. These other three had like corporate jobs and they all went, yep, fuck it, let's leave and go for it. So we had gone into it knowing that whatever happened, we had just done everything that we could have feasibly done. And Dan had just trained us so well in regards to the mental game. And we came into it as the underdogs, which even though we desperately wanted it, we did have less to prove. And we just came out the gate pretty hard. And then I never forget round 7, everything was just flowing. And I was looking at Sparky and we were basically laughing because the skydive was going so well. It was just like everything just relaxed, and all the journey and the grit and sweat had been prior to that. And then the competition was the time to have fun and just let the speed take care of itself, kind of thing, to quote Dan again. And we won pretty solidly. and earned our slot. And then we lost our sponsorship, but we did go back to our jobs, and we did things like sleep in hangars in Paris and rent out the house that we had originally rented, so we could just keep going. Even when we lost our sponsorship and we still didn't have our jobs, it didn't even occur to anyone to stop. We just kept
because that's part of the journey, isn't it? At the end of the day, like the end game, it's like a goal in two parts. The end game being the World Championship. So you guys all moved to Paris to train out there for the World Championships, which was in Germany.
Yeah, it was in France. It was in France.
France. No. Sorry, Maubeuge, my bad. Yeah.
Yeah, we still were going back and forth to Paris a little bit, and so you know, some of us would go home and pick up temp work. I did some videographer work for Tandems on the side, and we literally did do things like ask the owners if we could sleep in the hangar. So we could.
My God, it's such a journey just to get to the point where you get to go to France and compete.
Yeah,
what's it like to get to the culmination of that journey after over years now? And I'm maxed out credit cards, no doubt, sleeping on all sorts of places. You get to the World Championship and it's all down to that one meet now. I mean, that's literally years of your life down to that one performance. What is that like?
It feels surreal. And we did, you know, we had a lot of mental training from Dan, thank God, which got us through, but we did have some wobbles for sure when we were there, because I think we had just put our life and soul and money and finances. So I think that the amount of pressure that we felt to make it all quote unquote worthwhile was immense. I remember taking off in the Porter with Kate, and just to lighten the mood, like she looked over and she went, well, fuck, on round one, because we were there. And it was like, okay, so now we gotta perform. And Dan always joked that you need to train hard enough to win not at your best, and that's what happened. We weren't at our best, and we had some very sketchy exits where the porter was running in so fast that our cameraman nearly fell off multiple times, and so our exits we had to train our exits to be opposite because the porter door was on the other side. It was a whole host of shit that we had to go through. We literally had to learn to write with our left hand to go compete at the World Championships and all that good stuff. So we had one exit that we almost pretty much funneled and took up like 10 seconds of our time, and I'll never forget that, like that feeling of just feeling like, oh my God, it's happening, and then just resetting and just going for it for the rest of the dive. And luckily we held on till the end.
Right. By how many points was it? Was it one? I seem to remember it was 1 point you won by. Yeah.
We got to do 6 rounds.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget this. Here's the thing about being chicks as well. And we didn't realize, we couldn't figure out, the winds were pretty bad, and we couldn't figure out why teams were starting to go again. But they kept the women on the ground, and it was because the Spanish team were too scared to jump in the wind. So the head of the competition just decided upon himself that the women weren't going to jump until the winds dropped, without consulting any of the teams. And so we would have done more rounds. It wasn't until we realized what happened. We were like, I'm sorry, it's up to Spain whether they want to jump or not, but we don't get dictated by Spain because they're not jump. Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, you guys, you got your goal. I mean, what must it felt like? Because it was a tough comp. I remember it well. Like, I remember seeing how you guys not struggle, but like you were like that all the way to the last one, and it's like, how does it feel to suddenly know that you've won and actually achieved the end goal of so many years? If you could put that into words, you know.
And we still talk about it a lot. It was immense relief. The word wasn't, I don't remember having the joy came later, but at the time, I remember our tears and our hugs were like, oh, thank we did it, thank fuck for that. And then then kind of the pride and everything came in. But honestly, it's so funny, you look back on that journey, and I'm sure everyone can compete. Like, the thing that I think about, I never think about the podium at the World Championships. I think about all the challenges and the moments of training that we overcame as the memory, not the actual.
The glory part.
It's not like I looked in the mirror the next day and was like, wow, I look so different. I'm a world champion now. It's like,
I'm so glad you said that, because that was really where I was getting to, like the idea that when you put so much on one end goal, what happens if you don't achieve it? Like if you guys have got the silver, like what does that mean for the last 3 or 4 years of your life? So the fact that even though you won, you can look back in retrospect and say, actually, the journey was probably the most important part to me because of the experience. That's kind of how I feel about anything when we undertake any kind of goal. It's the journey has to count as much, if not more, than the end game. Otherwise, you're leaving it all to chance at the end. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And dare I say, I might have learned more about life had we not won. I might have got more out of it, because what comes with the gold is ego is attached to that part, and a lot of different things come attached with not winning. Do I think we deserve to win? 100%. Do I think the result was right? 100%. But having the World Championship title has certainly helped me in a lot of regards. But if I'm really honest, I could say that life might have been even more eye-opening if we didn't win. But I don't know if my younger self could have handled that back then either. I think that's a pretty long journey for me.
Well, let's that journey is really just very interesting to hear about. Let's transition into how you've taken, and then you've had a very full skydiving career after that, including free fly, national champion, all sorts of other things, working for the military and stunts and what have you. But skydiving stunts to Stuntwoman, let's get into it.
Okay.
Tell us how that happened for you, and perhaps some of the challenges, real challenges you faced trying to get into the stunt world and actually just performing as an individual Stuntwoman.
Sure. I think the first thing that I'll say about the stunt thing, and this is how I've kind of always lived my life thus far, is you've heard I've done a lot of, I guess, mini careers, but I feel like they've all been building blocks to the next one. And I remember competing at Skydive Chicago, Melissa, in the free fly intermediate with my teammate Nicole at the time. And we were driving in, 2 days beforehand or a week beforehand, I said to her, I don't know what is coming after this, but I feel I need a shift and I need a change. And I remember saying it out loud. I said, I don't know what it is, but I know it when it will come. I'm just, skydiving will always be in my life, but I feel like I can't continue on the path that I'm on right now. I'm going to get stuck in a rut type of thing. Or there was something telling me I need a little bit of a shift. And I said that out loud. And then one day we were driving into Skydive Chicago for round 3 or something, and Craig O'Brien called me to see if I was available to double a woman on this TV show called Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. There was a skydiving sequence. She wasn't necessarily going to be skydiving, but the stunt coordinator really wanted a real skydiver, and I happened to look a decent amount like her. Mm-hmm. So I got that, and I got kind of a little bit of tingles when I got that call, although I had no idea at the time that it would lead to anything, but it was more grabbing that opportunity and running with it. So I went and did the job, and it was a lot of wire work and stuff like that, no skydiving at all. My gymnastics came in handy. I guess the stunt coordinator kind of liked my attitude, and he did say, like, what are you planning on doing for, like, are you staying in skydiving, or is this something you want to do? And I said, I've always thought about stunts ever since I was younger. I just never knew how or where, or the timing wasn't right, or I was always too scared to be in that kind of Hollywood environment. It terrified me, being like a small village girl from England. And he just said, well, start training. I can tell you some places where you need to go, and if you start training, I'll maybe try and hire you until you fuck up. It's literally what he said. Wow. He, like, knowing that stunt, he genuinely meant it, and he and by no means was it like, ta-da, now I'm a stunt woman. He would maybe call me once every 6 weeks to do something, and in the meantime, I started driving 3 hours on the freeway to go to places where other stunt people trained, and start meeting and training, and doubting myself and stressing and wondering what I'm even trying to do, and carrying on and having meltdowns and having friends saying, no, you've gone too far, don't stop now. And You know, so I think a lot of people think that my Agents of Shield job made me become a stunt woman. It was then, you know, 4 years of slogging, being presented with a potential opportunity that might lead somewhere. Because I could have easily just taken that job and gone, well, that was cool, and had a story to tell and continue doing what I was doing, and that the rest wasn't going to follow from that job.
But you're working at the same time as you're training to learn how to become a stunt woman, right?
Still doing AFF and at the Paris school, and doing military contracts at Paris, and then every now and then calling in sick.
So there must be times then when you are up for work for something that you really have little to no experience in. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yeah. So
what's that like?
Well, there was one of the jobs that kind of put me on the map with this person. He was like, are you comfortable in water? And I genuinely said, yeah, I am. He's like, but this is like, you know, you're going to be like deep down in a tank, might not be able to see, like on a reg, like you need an extended breath hold, can't panic, like it's going to be safe, but to get the job done and for it to look good, you can't panic. And I felt, I grew up in the water and I was a former lifeguard, but the difference between them is I could have said, yeah, see you in 2 weeks. But what I did is I went to the local pool every day and just practiced swimming underwater and doing, like, I just turned up so over prepared for that job, but it helped me relax doing the actual job itself because I had over prepared, right? I could hold my breath twice as long as I needed to. So I was super confident, and that's where, you know, my mum's mentality came in, like prepare. It's better to be prepared than underprepared. So but there are some jobs where you turn up and you don't know how to do it, and because every stunt is completely different. Gymnastics, without a doubt, has helped me because I kind of have a rough idea of where my legs and arms go when I'm upside down. Skydiving and four-way competition, without a doubt, helped me prepare for that, because for those of you that don't know about formation skydiving, we have never done that particular skydive in that particular order ever before the competition day. We engineer it, you know, on the creepers, and then we go up and do it. So it's a huge mental game. And anyone that's competed in that can attest that you can get yourself really mentally scrambled, because it's not like you're training a dance routine that you know off by heart. You're doing it for the first time.
Yeah.
And that, without a doubt, helped me in stunts.
Because there has to be an element of overcoming self-doubt as well, when you're not quite sure what you're going to get when you go to this stunt, and especially when you're new. It's like, it's one thing to do it when you've got 10,000 skydives and you're like, I haven't done it before, but I've got all of the experience. But when you don't have all that experience, it's a little like, is it fake it to make it a little bit, or
yeah.
like,
yeah, so my whole life I've faked it to make it, honestly. And I realize most other people are doing it as well. It's just at the time you don't realize. There isn't the biggest thing, I think, is just not panicking and taking it in, and having a little bit of self-confidence that you do have the physical ability. What's going to mess you up in this stunt that you've never done before is the brain and panicking, or right. And one thing I've always talked about, this I learned in skydiving, that Dan always used to try and train us not to ever feel nerves. And I couldn't get that. I always got nervous before competitions or training jumps or anything. The nerves would come, so I just had a different approach where I would feel physically nervous, but I would literally talk to my body separately, like, okay, you do whatever you're doing down there, but I'm super calm up here. Like, that's okay. Otherwise, I would start to feel nervous, and that would make me panic, because I'd be like, I'm not supposed to feel nervous. I'm feeling nervous, and it would get worse. So this time, because I knew I'd feel nervous, I'd be like, okay, there it is. My heart's fluttering. I feel a bit.
Acknowledge it and move on, kind of thing.
Like, all right, that's good. And I do that with stunts too. Like, when it's building up and they're like, okay, perform a set, I'll feel it rise. And I'd be like, all right, there it is. Your body's getting ready to do something. Brain's just going to slow down. So
you almost acknowledge it, the nerves, not as nerves, but just as part of preparation.
Yeah, and because I expect it, it doesn't make me panic more. I'm like, this is the norm, this is the feeling that always happens, that's okay.
Mm.
I try and turn it into a positive, like, all right, body's preparing to do something physical, awesome. Brain is not going to do that. Brain's going to slow the fuck down. So
I like that. It's like normalizing it.
Yeah, 100%. And I found that the more I tried to not feel those feelings or push them away, like the worse it got. So I was like, I need to change my strategy. Whereas like Sarah, I was so jealous, so chill. She was so chill. Nothing ever fazed her, and she used to keep me calm. But I just couldn't do it. Like, I feel nervous.
Well, that's a super great tool. I love the idea of like not letting nerves and fear be a thing, but letting it, just recognizing it as something else and expecting it and not being fazed by it. Let me ask you a little bit, because we're getting to the end of our hour and I really want to talk about this for sure. You are paid to be other people. That is a real mind numbing, kind of like a mind exercise that I've got to ask you about, because in this day and age where you're, you know, like just the mental game of trying to be your best self, as it were, but you're also actually paid to be other people. Like how does that feel? How does it occur for you as a stunt woman? How do you deal with it?
At the beginning, terribly. I dealt with it terribly, to the point that I got eating disorders from it and just got so stressed out about it. Like it would take over everything. Because, you know, most actresses are inherently quite slim and I'm not naturally. And I would get myself worked up about it. And then I did some therapy, really got into the weeds with it a lot more, and just slowly gave a lot less fucks about it. And if I was tired, someone put it to me once, you know, we used to put so much pressure on what size you are is correct and what isn't, right? And we've come a long way as a society, especially with the Me Too movement and everything in the last 5 years, I think, too. But someone once described it to me saying, would you be offended if you didn't get a job because they said they needed a left-handed person? I was like, no, like, that's how you should feel if you don't get a job because the size of your hips aren't correct. And
right.
Like, shit, you're right. It's like, because I attached, because of society and growing up and lots of other outside factors, I attached so much shame to not being the correct size, which is obviously ridiculous looking back on it, but I really did. Now I just realize that the comparison is the killer of all joy. And stay in your lane, because if you try trying to be other people, you're missing the most unique thing, which is your uniqueness. There's nobody out there, and that is your superpower. Like, you as an individual is your superpower. Well, you start losing your way when you try and compare yourself to others. And I spent years obsessing about certain women that I'd never met, that I thought I had to be like that in the stunt industry. And then I met them and they were absolute assholes. I was like, I cannot believe I wasted years trying to emulate this human being, like physically or how they train. And actually, as a human being, you're not someone that is on my side of the moral compass at all. And it's really mind-blowing. It's like, what do you want to focus on? Do you like focus on yourself, you idiot? It's like such a comparison is the biggest waste of time.
Do you feel like because if you don't know someone, you almost idolize what they're like, who they are, and what values they may have and what have you, just really projecting your desires onto them without actually meeting them. And then as for someone like yourself who's in that industry, you get to meet them, there must be like the glass is shattered in a way, you know, it's like the reality of it can be quite liberating, I would imagine.
Really liberating. And then the hilarious thing is that someone once mentioned to me, and it hadn't even occurred to me, they're like, you know, people compare themselves to you. And I was like, well, that's stupid. And then she was like, yeah, and that's what you do. And they're like, there's people out there that think you have this certain like life and have, you know, don't understand that you have the same worries and insecurities. You get pissed off at your husband for not unloading the dishwasher, you hate how you look this day, none of your clothes, like all the same bullshit that everybody deals with, but they see Hollywood and life, and that's what they're comparing to, like, oh, I wish I was like Hannah Burtz. And that's when I was like, it didn't even occur to me that other people might be doing that about me personally, because you get caught up in your own bullshit. So
Well, so well, let's just head towards a wrap up around that then. What challenges do you still have in your life that are really the things that you're still struggling with? Give us your sense of your humanity.
Yeah.
You've done that for the last hour, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying.
Going a little bit easier on myself if I've messed up or I've lost my way a little bit. Sometimes I can kind of beat myself up for just not working hard enough or training hard enough or watching other people do stuff. It's comparison, not staying in my own lane. But I catch it quicker now. So I'm definitely working on that. But the comparison thing is still something that I struggle with, but I'm much more aware of it and I bring it back to reality much quicker. And I'm really terrible about having, and I also make people laugh about having a regular workout program and being disciplined. If I don't have a goal, I'm a drifter. So I'm still working on a little bit more consistency about what should be my priorities to take care of myself, as opposed to get caught up in life, which we all know is a thing. So I'm not a machine by any stretch of the imagination. I have all the same ridiculous struggles that we all deal with on a day-to-day basis. It's just every now and then I look like a superhero and people forget. And it's all smoke and mirrors, What? It's not brave. It's, what I do. It's only brave if you're scared of it, right? So there's some stuff that people might think is incredibly brave, but it doesn't bother me at all. Or someone can walk into an office and hold an entire meeting in front of a boardroom of men. I think that's incredibly brave. I think that's like one, bravery is perception. It's not brave if we're not scared of it, right?
And I don't want to finish on what your challenges. Perhaps what with the last thing I may ask you is, I mean, you've obviously had a lot of extraordinary experiences and you've clearly been working on your own personal challenges through it. What are some of the things that you feel like you are much better, you have much better tools to deal with now?
I think it's taken me a long time. I'm a lot less reactionary when injustice is spoken out loud. So I'm much better at taking a breath, letting that other person speak, listening, and then questioning them to help a conversation and engage in a discussion, as opposed to telling them why they're wrong, because people love that, right? really well. So I'm definitely, I think I am better at listening, the understanding that we're all different and not to take everybody on face value, and to know everybody has a personal story and everybody's hurting in some way. I used to be not as empathetic as I am to people that didn't have the same opinion as me.
Empathy, I love that. What a great way to be able to grow as well, with more empathy. What's next? Can you tell us, or would you have to kill us?
No, I just came off working on a movie for 4 months called Atlas. It's a Jennifer Lopez movie. I was just a bit of an odd bod doing different jobs the whole time as part of the core team, and now I'm just back to how I want it, which is kind of called day playing, where you'll do a day here and a day here on different TV shows, cheesy TV shows. So tomorrow I am working on a show. It's a space show called For All Mankind. I'm just part of a big stunt group that we're doing a scene, and then dipping back into doubling some regular characters on TV shows. So nothing supremely exciting, but no major projects coming up. I just want to be in town.
It's all very last minute productions, as we call it, isn't it?
One, as we know, and I apologize for that. So it's all phone calls come in as and when, but doing my best to stay in town so I can stay with my hubbies and horses and donkeys.
I was about to say that's how I was going to wrap up. Like when you're not on set, you're playing with your beautiful animals in the farm that you have, and I love watching all those pictures and videos of your horses and donkeys, and of course Travis. Just so I throw him in there. Oh, fantastic! What a great conversation. Thanks, Hannah. It's so validating. It's validating to hear the challenges that you face, and to hear a little bit more of the reality behind the special moments that we see, which are of course are all incredible. But it's both inspiring and also gives us all great tools to hear how you've managed to get to that point and do it in a very real way. So we appreciate your candor and your sharing of the struggles that you've had, and we're very excited to see what's coming next. And I'm very excited, hopefully, to see you in March at our training camp. Fingers crossed. You never know. Can we borrow a Hollywood, please, just for 5 days?
Use this time I'm close. So.
All right. Thank you so much, Hannah. You're awesome. And Melissa, of course, doing back office, and to everybody that's joined us, thank you. We hope that you got some value out of this, and it's just always great to share with everybody. So we're going to be taking a little bit of a break for a few months, but we are actually going to be in PIA. The end of February is the next time you can see a highlight conversation. You can see it live. There's going to be 7 members of the team at PIA, and we're going to be taking part in a fireside chat. What that means is there's going to be 7 of us sitting around a table, hosted by Mr. James LeBarry, and that's going to be fun. You guys can come and be a part of that. We'd love to have conversation with you in person at PIA. Otherwise, thank you all, and bless you all, and have a wonderful night. Bye, everybody.